Virginia's state forces then served as a military advisor to Jefferson Davis. Put in charge of the Confederacy's Army of Northern Virginia in June 1862, Lee led his ragtag Confederates to one implausible victory after another over their opposite number, the Union Army of the Potomac. But the victories were all won on Virginia's soil, and enfeebled the Virginia economy even as they defended it. Lee knew better than any other Southerner that the Confederacy's resources were too limited to keep fending off the Confederacy's enemy indefinitely. Only by carrying the war into the Union states, and only by leveraging the war weariness of the Union voting public into peace negotiations, could the Confederacy hope to win its independence. Still, this was by no means a far-fetched hope. In the fall of 1862, dissension over President Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation had caused unhappy voters in New York and New Jersey to install Democratic governors there. A new round of anti-war Democratic candidates were due to run in the fall 1863 governors' elections in Ohio and Pennsylvania. If those states elected anti-war governors and also turned against the war, they could force Lincoln either to begin peace talks or to resign. Lee's army, some 85,000 strong, struck northward in the second week of June, crossing the Potomac River and sweeping in a long arc up the Cumberland Valley until his advance guard was perched on the Susquehanna River overlooking the Pennsylvania state capital of Harrisburg. Lee's real goal, however, was not Harrisburg. What he really hoped was to lure the Army of the Potomac northward after him, and as soon as the Yankees had strung themselves out on the roads beyond their ability to help each other, to turn and smash the straggling parts of the Union Army, piece by piece, as he had planned the year before in Maryland. But even if all Lee did was to let the clock run as his army ravaged central Pennsylvania, he could simply let the politics of disheartenment take their own course in the North thereafter. It nearly worked. The morale of the army was never more favorable for offensive or defensive operations, wrote one Virginian. Victory will inevitably attend our arms in any collision with the enemy. True to Lee's expectation, the 95,000 men of the Army of the Potomac, panting and uncertain, set off after him, and as soon as Lee was satisfied that they had frantically marched themselves into disarray, he ordered a concentration of his own army at the south-central Pennsylvania crossroads town and county seat of Gettysburg, only 7 miles from the Maryland-Pennsylvania state line. Lee believed his army would be ready to pounce on the first parts of the Army of the Potomac that obligingly wandered within his reach. But the lead elements of the Army of the Potomac, commanded by Major General John Fulton Reynolds, got to Gettysburg first. And when Lee's own advance units arrived there on July 1st, they found Union troops holding on for dear life to the ground west of the town. Luckily, there were not many of them, only 3 of the Army of the Potomac's 7 infantry corps, and by day's end on July 1st, Lee's army was able to clear them away from the west of the town and force them to abandon the town of Gettysburg in a hugely disorganized flight. But at dusk, the Union soldiers were still holding on one strategic height south of the town known ominously as Cemetery Hill, from the fact that the town burial ground, with its ceremonial arched gateway, was perched on it. Lee assumed that he could wait for daylight to finish the job. However, by the morning of July 2nd, 3 more infantry corps of the Army of the Potomac had raced up from Maryland to Gettysburg, and Lee was forced to mount a bloody and ambitious assault on a series of Union positions, the Peach Orchard, the Wheatfield, Little Round Top, whose bland and harmless names belied the viciousness of the fighting that raged around them late into the evening. Lee's attack on July 2nd, organized by his principal lieutenant, James Longstreet, came within an ace of succeeding, so on the next day, Lee launched Longstreet again, in what Lee assumed would be the final blow for a Union army now clearly on the ropes. Lee sent 1 division of fresh rebel infantry, commanded by George E. Pickett, alongside parts of 2 other divisions from the earlier days' fights, straight at the vital nape of the Union Army's neck, just behind Cemetery Hill. The rebels indeed punched holes in the Union defenses in what would always be known afterward as Pickett's Charge, but they couldn't hold them. Amazed at the failure of his gambit and appalled at the cost in lives, Lee ordered his army to retreat back across the Potomac. Just on those terms alone, Gettysburg was an unmistakable sign of Confederate disaster. A soldier in Joseph